The reason we're teaching you 24 sales closing techniques is simply this. The average sale, over 80% of sales, are closed after the 5th attempt at closing. That means after the 5th time that you have asked or given the prospect an opportunity to buy, that's when over 80% of the closes take place. And only about 10% of salespeople have enough closing techniques and have enough ability to ask for the sale more than 5 times without giving up. The more closing techniques you know, the more likely it is that you will close the sale in the course of the sales interview. Remember, selling is a skill. Good salespeople are made, not born. Most of the most successful salespeople in America were at one time shy, insecure, and clumsy at selling. They became great salespeople by learning and practicing the essential skills of selling, including how to close the sale. And if you do what they do, you'll be successful too, and nothing can stop you. Before we start talking about the closes, I'd like to talk about the antecedents to closing. I think one of Murphy's laws is that before you do anything, you have to do something else first. And before you close, you have to do several other things first. So let me give you the 2 psychological antecedents to closing. In other words, you must have these if you want to be effective. Number 1, of course, which you've heard 1,000 times, is enthusiasm. 51% of all closing effectiveness comes from your enthusiasm, your excitement about the product. And as a matter of fact, one of the best definitions I ever heard of of a sale is that a sale is what takes place when there is a transfer of enthusiasm. In other words, when you transfer your enthusiasm about the product or service into the mind of the other person, a sale takes place. Now, this requires, of course, that you have some enthusiasm to transfer into the mind of the other person, which means that the most effective salespeople know their product, they believe in their product, they love their product, and they believe that their product has very worthwhile benefits for their customer. And this is something that I suggest to you, and I've suggested to thousands of salespeople, that if you don't believe in your product, if you don't love your product, if you wouldn't use it yourself, if you wouldn't sell it to your best friend or your mother, then you're probably selling the wrong product. Because you can never get that head of enthusiasm that is transferred into the mind of the prospect that causes them to buy. Now, with regard to enthusiasm, I don't mean the rah-rah, jump-around type of enthusiasm. I mean what is called constrained enthusiasm. It's when the enthusiasm is kept inside you like a kettle, a boiling kettle with the lid put on it, so that you literally bristle with enthusiasm. You have sort of a dynamic tension of excitement about you, but it isn't in the speed of talk or it isn't in your actions. It's contained within. And constrained enthusiasm has perhaps the most powerful effect on human personality that you can imagine. As Ralph Waldo Emerson said, nothing great was ever accomplished without enthusiasm. Well, the second psychological quality is confident expectations. You must confidently expect that the person is going to say yes if you ask often enough. If you ask the person to buy, you must confidently expect them to buy. So you ask expectantly. Would you like the red one or the green one today? In other words, not are you going to take one or not, is this what you had in mind, but you ask it expectantly. And the more confidently you expect to sell, the more likely it is that you will sell. And of course, again, confidence in selling comes from knowledge, it comes from practice, it comes from experience, it comes from believing that the product can do what you say that the product will do. Well, in the process of selling, there are other steps that you have to take. The first step, of course, is qualifying. That you cannot sell a product until you have thoroughly qualified the prospect. And every one of us has been in a situation where we have walked into a store or onto a used car lot and somebody comes up and says, why don't you take it? Or, are you going to buy it today? Or they try to close you without ever asking you what it is you want or what you need. And there's nothing makes us more furious than to have somebody treat us like an idiot. So you have to qualify the prospect. You have to find out 4 things, the answers to 4 things. Question number 1, does the prospect need what you're selling? Question number 2, can the prospect use what you're selling? Like many companies may need a computer, but they may not be able to use it because of the manpower, because of the configuration of the organization. Number 3, can the person afford the product? And number 4, does the person want the product? You see, before you can close, the prospect has to have demonstrated that he or she has a desire to enjoy the benefits of your product or service. So once you've gone through the presentation, once you've gone through and you've qualified on all 4 of those categories and the person wants to buy it, then you're in a position to begin closing. Most of the close in every sale is made in the presentations. In some products, especially in real estate, most of the close is made in how well you present the product to the prospect. The closing technique at the end is almost irrelevant. In many products, the closing technique is very, very important. The key reason why the closing technique is important is this, is that the moment of closing is always difficult. There's always a moment of tension. We call this buyer's remorse in advance, if you like, where whenever we feel that whenever we reach the point where we have to make an important decision, whenever we have to put up money, lay ourselves on the line, what happens is this tension wells up inside of us. And this tension is called the fear of failure.